We've been talking about the future of agriculture today, and now we want to take a look back at the past. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deken.
Oklahoma is dry. Since November of 2010, the state has been under some type of drought designation, and the signs don't point to much relief in the near future.
The forecast had shown that we were going to have an El Nino, which would tend to help us out. It causes us to, here in the southern plains, to have a little bit of a wetter and cooler October through March period. But unfortunately, that El Nino didn't ever materialize.
With a dry forecast, preparations for a third year of drought, and the recent dust storms that blew across the Great Plains, Oklahomans may be asking if we could return to one of our state's actual darkest times. Historian Dayton Duncan worked on a film called The Dust Bowl that will air on OETA on Sunday night and Monday night. Dayton says that the years before the soil blew, the area was much different even than it is now.
It was a beautiful grassland at one point, and for a variety of reasons, in the early teens and the 20s, the equivalent of the state of Ohio got changed, suddenly from a grassland to to a cash crop land. And some of that land should never have been turned in the first place.
Back then, it really was promoted as kind of, the deeper you could till, the better your yields were going to be. You wanted to bury that residue.
The downside is they really didn't know the ramifications of what would happen if they plowed up the high plains and portions of the southern plains with no respect to soil types and erosivity of those soil types. As
one of the cattlemen said, when he saw all the plowing going, he was talking to his son, he said, "Look at it, it's wrong side up." That was sort of ignoring why was this a grassland in which the grasses were generally shorter than taller. It's because every once in a while on the Great Plains you're going to have a drought, and every once in a while that drought's going to be really hard, and every once in a while it's going to be really hard and really long.
You can really liken it to what we've seen the last couple of years, where we had the severe drought of 2010 starting in about October, lasted through about October 2011. And then we saw a great deal of relief through the winter, and then a return to drought as we got into late spring. That's the type of situation we saw back in the Dust Bowl.
And it happened in the 1930s. Rain stopped, the air was hot, and started to blow like it usually does around here. The soils that producers had turned had been planted with hopes of raising another crop, but instead, clouds of dust grew from the soil and started to move.
Out in the panhandle, you get into these very fine sandy loams and very fine loamy sands. And those very fine sands, those are the ones that can really start blowing very quickly and very readily, because a large sand particle is too heavy to be lifted off the ground. It just rolls. But a very fine sand, it can be moved and it bounces and it just starts bouncing. And that bouncing action will actually dislodge your clays and your silts. And then they start bouncing, and then they get lifted up in the air.
So if the droughts of the 1930s and our current one are so similar, why haven't we seen walls of dust sweeping across the Great Plains?
As we got past the Dust Bowl, the 1930s drought, we got into another similar drought in the 1950s, which statistically for the state is probably worse than the Dust Bowl drought, but we didn't see that massive amount of erosion. And again, that's due to those better conservation practices that agriculture learned from the 1930s.
In large part, a lot of our marginal land has been taken out of production, either through CRP or just the realization that, hey, this cropland's not suitable for raising crops.
I work in cropland. Same thing goes for pasture land, trying to better understand how to incorporate resilience against these droughts.
Discovery of nitrogen fertilizer started the mass production of fertilizer, and especially herbicides. I think that kind of transformed the way we thought about managing the land, that we do have, a certain amount, percentage of our acres, 20–30% of our acres in no-till, which try to maintain that residue on the surface year-round. So I think that even though it's pockets here and there, that's really what is holding in certain places, keeps that dirt from blowing.
We're moving forward on some things. No-till's one that's come on in the last 10 years. Now we're looking at cover crops in the fallow period. We're trying to continue to develop our understanding of soil moisture and how different crop rotations influence soil moisture and how we may better take advantage of it. We're learning these things in a drought.
It's going to be hot, and we'll always have a dry year or two, or three. But we don't have to live with a wall of soil from the ground to the sun marching across the prairie like they did back in the 30s, because of the lessons learned by those who plowed all the prairie that they could, and those that took a different approach to agriculture.